Welcome to Progressive Videos. Decorative Walks and Patios is part of a 5-video series created to assist the homeowner with the design, layout, and installation of his or her own professional quality landscape. Walkways or patios are a great way to add a very beautiful and functional dimension to any residential landscape. Style and design can range from basic to very elaborate. Any construction project begins with a design or plan. A formal landscape plan is ideal, but a scale drawing of the area where you wish to install the patio or walkway is adequate. Now's the time to consider straight edges, curves, angles, and basic dimensions. Let's start with the basics of simple concrete and then explore some of the other ways to enhance walkways and patios to make them more decorative. The first step is to prepare the site. The area needs to be relatively flat with a slight pitch away from existing structures to ensure proper drainage. Lay out the dimensions on the ground with a string line or marking paint. The soil under the concrete also needs to be compacted to minimize settling or cracking of the concrete. This is particularly important where soils have been disturbed, such as along foundations. If fill is needed, add road base or fine gravel and continue compacting until you attain rough grade. For most concrete walks and patios, a 4-inch slab is standard. Therefore, regular 2x4s make excellent forms where straight edges are required. Metal landscape edging or smooth lap siding works great for curved forms. You'll need 2x4s, metal edging, edging pins, 1x2 stakes, and nails. Install forms so that the concrete will pitch away from the existing structure about 1/4 inch per foot. It's important to stake all forms solidly, especially where the ends of forms meet or overlap. Be sure stakes are outside the forms. Wherever possible, drive stakes below the top of the form before nailing. Use a level regularly to check grade and pitch. You'll also need to toenail adjoining 2x4 forms to each other to align and stabilize them. Steel edging pins are very useful when initially setting metal edging forms. However, edging should be backed with wooden stakes to prevent any movement when the concrete is formed. When installing brick inlay, divider forms must allow for the length of the brick plus 2 3/8-inch joints. If the slope exceeds 1/4 inch and 1 foot, a thickened edge may be needed. For this, use taller forms and additional bracing. For steeper slopes, another solution is to utilize some type of retaining wall to level the area. Landscape timbers, brick, or small boulders work well. See our retaining walls video for the how-tos. Use a 2x4 to grade the soil inside the forms to a uniform 4-inch depth. If steps are desired or necessary, install the forms so that the risers are as uniform as possible with a maximum height of 8 inches. The treads should be a minimum of 12 inches deep. An easy way to build steps is to form them with timbers and fill the open areas with concrete. When forming slabs 12 feet wide or more, grade stakes placed about 5 feet apart are helpful. A string line stretched from one form to another can be used to set the height of the grade stakes. To reinforce concrete, rebar, wire mesh, or fiber mesh are options. For small pours, you can mix your own concrete by hand or with a portable mixer. When mixing by hand, a wheelbarrow and a mortar hoe work great. 1 yard of concrete covers 80 square feet, 4 inches thick, and takes approximately 5 bags of Portland cement and 1¼ tons of sand and gravel mix. Sand and gravel mix consists of 2 parts sand and 3 parts gravel. We recommend a ratio of 4 shovels of Portland to 12 shovels of sand and gravel mix. The concrete should be wet enough to settle out to a rounded mound when poured. For larger jobs, you may want to call your local ready-mix supplier. Request your order in cubic yards. Ask for 3,000-pound mix with a 5 to 6 inch slump. Slump is a measure of the wetness of concrete. Before beginning your pour, it's often a good idea to dampen the area inside the forms to slow the drying process. Rapid drying tends to weaken concrete. Start the pour at the furthest or least accessible point. It's more efficient to pour concrete directly into the forms whenever possible rather than shoveling. Emptying the wheelbarrow with a quick, smooth motion will minimize splashing. A simple ramp system may be necessary to improve access and minimize form damage. A square nose shovel is handy for mudding or spreading the concrete into corners or low spots. Overfill the form slightly to be sure that you have enough concrete to work with. The screed board is used to level the concrete with the top of the forms. Tilting the board toward you creates a sharper edge for the initial leveling. Then, use a sawing motion to further flatten and compact the concrete as you pull the board toward you. On larger pours, use the grade stakes discussed earlier to set the screed grade. Remove the stakes before finishing. Immediately after screeding, use a bull float or hand float to smooth the concrete, force down the aggregate, and bring up the cream for finishing. Raise the leading edge of your float and other finishing tools slightly to get a smoother finish. Next, use the edging tool to round the edges and push down any aggregate along the forms. If edging was used, pull the pins now. Weakened plane joints are created during the finishing process to prevent random cracking. They're used every 4 to 5 feet on walkways and wherever needed on larger slabs to keep the maximum pad size at 10 by 10 feet or smaller. They should also be used wherever a narrow pad joins a larger one. Snap a string line. Use a 2x4 as a guide to ensure a straight joint. One 1/2 inch felt fiber board should be used to separate new concrete from existing concrete. When the concrete is hard enough that tool marks are easy to remove, use a trowel to get a very smooth, blemish-free surface. You may need to touch up joints and edges as you complete the finishing process. Trowel against the brick dividers. Don't edge them. To provide a non-slip surface, use a fine bristled push broom to neatly roughen the finish. Dampen the broom slightly and roughen the edges. Then, lightly pull or push the broom across the concrete. As a rule, make your broom marks perpendicular to the direction of travel. Another option is to use a half broom or fine bristled scrub brush to create a swirled pattern. Keep in mind that timing is critical during the entire finishing process. Beyond a certain point, concrete can become very difficult to finish. Have plenty of help or do smaller sections at a time to be sure that you can keep up. After the broomed concrete is set up for a couple of hours, we recommend that you apply a quality sealer. This will slow the curing process and result in a stronger, more water-resistant concrete. Most forms can be carefully removed after a day or so. However, forms covering step faces need to be removed late in the finishing process so that those surfaces can be finished properly too. Allow 1 to 2 days before walking on new concrete. It's best to wait 2 weeks before driving on it. Regular concrete walks and patios can be attractive as well as functional when properly installed. However, there are a variety of ways to make them even more decorative. One way is to use attractive permanent dividers instead of simple joints to separate the pads. In fact, pads can be bordered on all four sides. Install the dividers wherever you would put a weakened plane joint. A nice way to border and divide concrete is with brick inlay. Start by picking a style, size, and color of brick or paver that coordinates with existing features. It takes about 4.5 standard bricks per linear foot of divider or border. This measurement allows for 1 3/8 inch mortar joint per brick. To install brick inlay or borders, dig out between the pads to allow for 4 inches of concrete plus the height of the bricks. If a brick border is to be added, dig a footer trench along the outside edge of each pad as well. When setting the brick, use a slightly stiffer concrete. Overfill the footer slightly, then use a brick to screed the mortar to the desired depth. Space the bricks as evenly as possible. Joints can be adjusted slightly to ensure that the outside bricks match the edge of the pads. A short length of 2x4 or a 2-foot level and mallet can be used to align brick ends and tops with each other and the pads. Adjust joints as needed to assure that the bricks come out flush with the ends of the pad. On curved edges or corners, some bricks may have to be cut to ensure uniform joints and a symmetrical pattern. A mason saw or a circular saw with a masonry blade works well. Be sure to wear goggles and protect your hands. Let the bricks set up for a day and then you can begin to grout the joints. Use 4 shovels of Portland cement, 12 shovels of sand, and 1 shovel of hydrated lime. Also, add the manufacturer's recommended amount of latex concrete adhesive to improve bonding and strength. The mortar needs to be wet enough to easily flow through a grout bag. Simple vinyl grout bags seem to work best. Use rubber gloves and have a bucket of water handy to periodically wash the bags. Carefully squeeze the grout into the joints, overfilling slightly as you go. If you're using bricks, be sure to fill the holes in the bricks. The excess will make it easier to tool the joints properly. Begin tooling the joints when the mortar hardens to the texture of putty. A convex jointer works well for striking joints. Let the excess mortar set until it can be removed without smearing. Then shave it off with a trowel and remove it with a soft brush. Redo the joints a second time to get a nice finished appearance. Bricks can also be used upright in a soldier course to face steps. After a day or two, scrape off any smeared mortar with a pointing tool or a piece of brick. Most stains can be removed with a scrub brush and water. Stubborn stains can be removed with a mild muriatic acid solution and a scrub brush. Read the instructions carefully for the right mixture. Be sure to wear rubber gloves and goggles when using the acid solution. And rinse the entire area thoroughly with water. Let's look at some other options for decorative walks and patios. Flat slab-like rock or flagstone offers a variety of uses for both. The simplest approach is to use appropriate sized pieces as stepping stones in sod or decorative gravel areas. Flagstone 1½ to 1¾ inches thick is ideal. It's thick enough not to break, heavy enough to be stable, and light enough to handle. Simply space pieces a comfortable stepping distance apart and bed them so that the top surface is flush with the sod of the top of the gravel. Another alternative is to bed flagstone in bordered topsoil areas and fill the spaces between pieces with ground covering plants. This simple technique can be used to create very beautiful walkways, mini patios, and garden areas. After forming and grading the area to a 4-inch depth, add topsoil and screed it to a smooth uniform depth of about 2½ inches. As you begin selecting and setting stones, it helps to spread them out like pieces of a puzzle. Utilize straight edges and natural curves to fit pieces together with uniform 2 to 3 inch joints on all sides. Level and stabilize each piece as you go so that the tops of the stones are flush with the top of the forms. Finally, install ground cover plants in the joints. Another attractive idea for very functional, full-sized walkways or patios is to use the same technique, but fill the forms with fine crushed rock or breeze. As breeze settles, it compacts into a very firm, stable base. Flagstone can be bedded in the breeze to create some very beautiful patterns. Set the stones with 1 to 2 inch joints. Finally, sweep breeze into the joints and wet it with a hose to settle the joints. Perhaps the ultimate way to utilize flagstone for walks and patios is to overlay it on concrete. The procedures for forming and pouring are the same as for regular concrete, but the concrete is screeded down 2 inches below the top of the forms to allow room to overlay the flagstone. Let the concrete base set up for a day or two, then you can begin to set the stones in mortar. The mortar formula is the same as that used for inlaid brick. Start by laying out the stones in an area near where you're working. Lay a small bed of mortar the size of the stone you wish to place. Set the stone in wet mortar and level it to each border. Continue this process until all stones are set. When all the stones are set, go back and begin packing joints with a fairly stiff mortar mix using a trowel and pointing tool. Joints should be filled flush or slightly crowned to prevent any standing water. A fine bristled brush can be used to roughen and blend the joints. After the joints are finished, carefully remove the forms and touch up the sides and edges. A trowel can be used to butter or parge the sides with mortar to fill holes and seal cracks. Keeping the surface damp for a day or two will slow the curing process and help to minimize cracking. If cracks appear, paint the joints with a thin, rich mortar mixture with extra adhesive added. Allow a day or two for the mortar to dry and then use a scrub brush and water to clean off any mortar stains. A wire brush can be used on stubborn spots. An alternative to flagstone overlay is split paver bricks. Use a thinner mortar base for setting bricks. The only other difference is that all of your pieces are uniform size and shape, so more precision is needed to keep joints tight and straight. Also, as with brick inlay, it's easier to grout the joints than to pack them by hand. One nice feature of pavers is that the uniform rectangular shape allows for a variety of symmetrical patterns. We hope that you found these ideas helpful and useful. Decorative walks and patios can add a great touch to your landscape. With a little imagination, planning, and work, you can turn your yard into a showcase. Thank you for spending this time with us. We hope you've enjoyed it and are creating your own walks and patios. To obtain other videos in our landscape series, please use the enclosed postcard for your order.